Hello everyone, this is Venom Geek Media here, and today I'm going to be doing a bit of a different video. As you may well know, my channel doesn't really cover new Trek shows that often because, well, I try to avoid tying myself too much into whatever's going on right now at that moment. With any show, not just new Trek, but any TV show, it's pointless doing an episode by episode breakdown because, or, saying what you think of an individual episode, because ultimately, these are serialized stories. So your thoughts are going to be at the end of a series. And so there's never really been much point or incentive for me to talk about new Star Trek shows. I'll talk about the ships when I like them, when I see them. But I'm breaking with that tradition today just because Star Trek Picard Season 2, it's just on my nerves, and it's quite irritating to me. So as you will have seen from the title of this video, I'm going to address one specific issue with the series. The series has many. What I'm going to address here, Star Trek Picard's attempt at politics. And I emphasize here, this is an attempt, and it's not a very good one, and I will explain why. Because it's bugged me. It's really, really annoyed me, because I can tell that the series wants to be about politics, and it wants to be about political issues and issues of the day, but it doesn't really know how, and it's partially boiled down to a general issue of writing a serialized story, particularly one that is between multiple different episode writers. But this is my disclaimer right here. Okay, I am not going to get into the actual real life political situation because there's no point. There's absolutely no point, because people will just go at each other in the comments. I'll get lumped in with one side or another, and frankly, I'm English. I don't have to get involved. Thank you. So I won't. Additionally, it's not really relevant in the show because it's all done so poorly. I'm more looking at this from a comparative. I'm going to compare it to previous examples of Star Trek that have done similar things and done it far more successfully. And this is also just an example of any writers out there, what not to do. I also want to assure people, I am not going fandom menace on you guys. I am not going to turn into a channel of negativity. This is just the one, and then it's done, and I move on. This is like my, therapy. This is my externalization. Okay, so we'll get into it. So it's very clear, or it comes off very much from the surrounding media and conversation and discourse, and maybe it's just because everything's political these days because of social media, but that Star Trek Picard wants to be about current day politics, and it wants to say something about current day politics. I was of the opinion very early in the series where people were still speculating as to the plotline or twist. I was speculating that they were going back to 2024 to stop Donald Trump or something like that. Something silly like that, which might have actually been quite entertaining. But yeah, it wants to be about current day issues. Now, Star Trek has been about current day issues before. Yes, they put them in the future, but equally sometimes they put them in the pretty much present, or indeed the actual present. So Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, with the saving the whales, that was a contemporary political issue. And then another example is Deep Space Nine's past tense, which is, okay, yeah, it's in the year 2024 or whatever, and this was, of course, back in 1990, whatever it was. But the issue at hand was very pertinent and relevant. They were putting it a little bit further in time, but, they were saying, this is the road we might go down. They were talking about current events and current issues. Star Trek has been about politics. No one thinks that it wasn't, okay? There is some differences. So there's basically two ways Star Trek will engage with politics, generally. This is a general summation. And that is in a descriptive way. So it will describe and explore an issue. So a good example of that would be Next Generation's High Ground, right? Where you've got these freedom fighters and against the government, an oppressive government on their planet. It's basically looking at the question of violence to achieve political change. I'm not going to use the T word. Now, that is a descriptive episode because it doesn't land on any of the two sides. It just, here's the issue, we leave it to the audience to work out, what to do here. It's a descriptive storyline. Now, that being said, you also get prescriptive storylines. Prescriptive storylines tell the audience kind of what to... They're giving the audience instruction. It is a form of instruction. So, for example, past tense. Past tense in a nutshell is, don't lock up homeless people, or, or throw them into ghettos, stuff like that. Or, in the case of Star Trek 4, it's save the whales. It's a pretty basic one, that, because, it's prescriptive content. It's prescriptive content. Now, this is important because Picard wants to be prescriptive. In its writing and in its attitude, it wants to be prescriptive. So that's just something to bear in mind. It's also worth bearing in mind that previously with prescriptive, in the example of past tense, which is a prescriptive story, just because it is a prescriptive story with a deliberate message or instruction, does not mean that it is not even-handed with the problem and does not give each side their dues. So there's that to bear in mind. So we'll now get into specifically Star Trek Picard and the issues it covers. So hold on to your hats, everyone, because Star Trek Picard is a show about many things. In fact, it is about all the things. Star Trek Picard covers pollution and environmental destruction, racism, poverty and inequality, healthcare, and immigration. Okay, you got all that? Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to discount a whole bunch of those because the show pays basically lip service to those issues. So, pollution and environmental destruction. Even though that's actually quite a core theme to the show and its resolution and the motivations of some of its characters, it's resolved in the background through basically an ex machina. Because basically, what is it? Renee goes to Saturn or whatever it is, finds a microbe that undoes all the pollution. It fixes everything. And it's like, man, yeah, I wonder what else that microbe does. Probably has some nasty side effects. Who knows? There's a real problem with that for if you're doing an environmentalist story, because you're basically saying, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Something will happen. Something will come up. Some new technology will come along and fix everything, and it'll be fine. And that new technology won't have any problems in itself. So if it's trying to be an environmentalist story, it's not a very good one, because it's basically saying, don't worry about it. We'll go to space and we'll find a thing that will fix everything. Additionally, the whole thing of pollution is that pollution and climate change it's basically in the background. Yes, it's talked about and it's shown, but it's not a key driving factor in the story, really. It's just a bit of set dressing. Racism is alluded to in a few lines, is never clearly shown or addressed. So if there was racism in the world of 2024, or, in the way in which it's being alluded to, it's not resolved to any kind of satisfaction. That's a problem. What, are you saying that they were still racist in the 24th century? Because you haven't said what's changed. Okay. Then you've got the issue of poverty and inequality. Again, this is something that is in the background, that is used as set dressing. It also, I don't know whether intentional or not, but it very much comes off as a Californian thing. One cannot help but notice that, this is a Hollywood production being shot in California, as they all are, and probably because it was cheap. Their view on poverty and extreme inequality very much is probably generated from the fact that that's what they see, but that's not necessarily the case for the broader US. Not to say that there isn't poverty and inequality, but certainly Los Angeles is a very extreme example in the current day, and it's going to be very easy for some people to say, oh, well, that's just a California problem. Surely what you want to do is portray the universality of poverty and inequality as it does exist across the entire across the developed world, but it doesn't necessarily look like that. Next up, healthcare. So healthcare is alluded to be a problem. Oh, we can't take him to a hospital, blah, 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 blah. It wants to say something about the American healthcare system. It fails because it's never a problem in the show. For the amount of times that the characters are injured, there's never a point where they show up at a hospital and are refuse treatment or anything, because they just immediately go to the sexy doctor lady. And it's done. And it's like, so it wants to make that an issue, but it doesn't, because in the story it never is a problem. Okay, so we get to the final one, and this is the one that is actually given some substance and time. It's given some screen time. It's not just mentioned off screen, it actually has an important role in the plot. And that's immigration / ICE. So this is the most fleshed out of the issues, and it is very poorly executed. So, right. So what we'll get to here is a comparison on that specifically. So I'm going to compare this to past tense, because it's almost sometimes deliberately riffing on past tense and using some of the things, but far less successfully. So, first, we've got the issue. What is the issue in past tense? The issue in past tense is homelessness and unemployment. Large-scale homelessness and unemployment, probably some kind of economic recession or downturn affecting the poorest and sort of driving more and more people into poverty. What's the issue in Star Trek Picard? Immigration. I can't really give much more than that because it doesn't really say much more than that. That's it. People are coming into the US and the US doesn't want them to. You're starting to see the problem here. It's a very narrow picture, and it doesn't really explain the issue properly. Now, we'll look at the why. So, in the instance of past tense, why did this happen? Well, it happens from the result of social apathy and ignorance, which is demonstrated through a number of different characters, and some are worse than others. So we have 3 characters I'll go into. So we have the receptionist, who's very affected by what she sees, and it does get to her, and she does realise that it's wrong. But she's just sort of locked into this system, and she doesn't see that there's any other way of doing things. But she feels really bad about it. Then you have your businessman. I can't remember what the guy's name is. The big billionaire businessman. Essentially, they're just sort of ignorant, They're just ignorant. They don't know what's going on. They don't actually know the reality of what's going on in the sanctuary districts. And I'm sure if he did, he'd have a very different perspective. But essentially, it's ignorance in there. But for him, essentially, the key quality is ignorance. He just doesn't know. He just presumes it's being taken care of and it's all okay. And then we have the old guard guy, who's not, despite being a dick, indisputably, he's not just simply evil. Probably, I can go into really deep speculation about his character because I think it's alluded, it's all there under the surface, right? I think the reason he's so dismissive and abusive towards the residents and gives them all such short shrift is because because he's probably been doing this a long time, right? And he has to denigrate and dehumanize these people, call them losers, so that he doesn't view them as people. He doesn't view them as himself. Because if he did, he wouldn't be able to cope with what he has to do and what he has to see day in, day out with these people being left to suffer. And that I think is very much in the subtext, that this guy is he's deliberately putting a barrier between himself and the residents of the sanctuary district so that he doesn't have to contemplate and realize how bad it is, and that even he might get caught up in this thing. Okay, so why is this a problem in Picard? Because ICE is evil and probably racist. That's basically the only suggestion I have from Picard. ICE is evil and it likes to deport foreigners. That's great. That's really great. That's so helpful in understanding this issue. So that's the extent of the why this is a problem. Okay. So then we get to the resolution / prescription. So what was the episode telling you to do? Okay, So in past tense was telling you to learn to care again. Don't just let homelessness and poverty become the norm. Don't just ignore it and pretend it's not happening, and don't try to hide it away somewhere. It should bother you, and you shouldn't try to cover it up and hide it. You should see it so that you are continually bothered by it, and that you do something about it, and so you learn to care for your fellow man, right? Okay. What resolution or prescription does Picard give to the ice plotline? None. It basically cuts off after 2 episodes. It's just over. It's finished. It's done. Moving on. We've got to go to a gala, and Dr. Sung's got to run Picard over with the Tesla, and the Borg Queen's got to sing a musical number. We've got to move on. And it's like, okay, what? I thought this was going to be the big issue you were going to be addressing. No, we got to go on. Borg Queen's got a musical number in about 5 minutes. Got to move on. The show doesn't solve the issue. I guess the prescription is abolish ICE. I guess. I don't know. It doesn't say. Should the US maybe have a fairer, more tolerant immigration system? I don't know. The show doesn't tell me. It doesn't actually give me a valid thing. It just says, essentially what it is doing, it's basically saying, here's an issue, and this is how we feel about it. Then we'll move on. So it makes it incredibly frustrating to watch, because it's portraying issues, but it's giving them basically lip service. It almost feels like it's just having them for the sake of having them, rather than actually addressing them in any substantive way. Here's my summary as to why Picard fails at politics. Ultimately, what it is it speaks to a wider issue in the way this show is written. Too many cooks is a term that has been thrown around by several people, and I can imagine that, a writer has probably come in and very passionate and cares a lot about this issue, and, you kind of can't fault them for that, and they want to get into this to the show. They want to, leave their mark on it, but they're just one writer, maybe writing 2 out of 10 episodes, and the rest it just gets swept away, and it just gets swept away in the crazy nonsense of the Borg Queen doing a musical number, and Dr. Sung shenanigans. I'm not even going to get into the absurdity of those shenanigans because they're ridiculous. They are absurd. So, my suggestion is, if you want to have a message, if you want to say something, and if you want to say something about a modern political issue, you want to push a message. This is not saying you should. Okay, this is just, I'm not saying you should. You don't have to if you don't want to. But if you really feel the need to do so, then it's probably best to make sure that all your writers are on board first. Because otherwise they go in about 5 million different directions and don't actually adequately address things. And you just come off as it ends up coming off as you're just including the issues, maybe even just in a cynical attempt to cash in on the people who do actually care about those issues, and you don't actually care, but you just want to pretend to care so that you get their attention. So, like I say, if you're going to address political issues in your TV show, any TV show, I will say this very slowly, but you need to give it the screen time and the thought that it deserves. Because if you don't, you end up with this complete mess where clearly you wanted to talk about something, but you just didn't in any substantive way. If you want to do a political issue, even from a perspective of bias, and you don't want to necessarily give the other side a say, you still want to present the issue, explore, and resolve the issue. The show does none of that. So this is just my conclusion. This is just a little address, and this is meant for the people at Paramount who must have seen my videos by now. It's probably very arrogant of me to assume it, but I would have thought they must have seen my videos by now. Look, Star Trek is a good way to discuss issues and push for causes. But if you're going to do that, you need to make sure you're doing it properly. And you need to give a show. You've got, 10 hours of screen time. You've got more screen time than a movie. Okay? You've got a lot of time to get into the real nuts and bolts of any kind of issue or topic you want to explore. So use that 10-hour runtime and, make it more valuable and intelligent than a Twitter soundbite. Okay, that's what I'm going to say to the writers of Picard. You've got your 10-hour runtime. Use it properly. Do something more substantive than a Twitter soundbite. Even if people won't agree with you for your political beliefs, they will probably respect you for actually stating them in a coherent way and telling a coherent story around them, even if they don't necessarily agree with your conclusions. Okay? That's my rant on Star Trek Picard. Done. I'm done. It's over. It's out of my system. I won't talk about it again. We're finished. We're never going to see Dr. Sung and his Tesla again. We're never going to see the unshaven Wesley Crusher again. We're never going to see resurrected hologram ghost Elnor again. That's all finished. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. See you guys next time. Thank you guys so much for supporting. Thank you very much to my Navox, David Reeves, Tully DT, and Jeffrey Ballard. And thank you to my commanders, Martin McConville, Jeff Hallam, Captain's Quarters, Miami Jules, Chase Rector, PQSK, Philip Ty, Bird Monster, Straight Talk Crypto, Mark Philippe, and John Nicole. And my Centurions, Nathaniel Mead, Arian Fulton, Pendleberry, BOS Domestic Disputes, Adam Bowman, Marcus Hall, and Yard Hunter 420. Thank you guys for supporting this content. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next video.